and so we can get the scheduling started, and basically also how to communicate to the wider token engineering community so they can participate and get to know these frameworks better.
Yeah. So Sista, if I actually went into the slide, the Kopie von governance moral philosophy, and I like that's something that was really, really just from the first quote that we're facing philosophical bankruptcy was just so piercing and so incisive in its social commentary, which I think it's one of the things that we're lacking, that is having just like systemic problems across the cultural, legal, and economic sphere.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm if you could elaborate more on what that means, but I'd like to. I only barely got through it. I'd like to actually. I mean, it's packed. It's so
Totally. So this is today. We'll spar through it together.
okay. Awesome.
So, but that's just one of those 3 tracks. I believe you already get going. So that would be cool. How we can settle the content, like a short description of these sessions, and then basically how we can offer really schedule and then in advance communicate and reach out to people who can basically benefit from it, right? And reach out in community. So
I know. I know for a fact that for the cyber writing training next week, I'm going to be. Juanca was kind enough to lend me a spot in the training, and I'm going to be presenting on the psychology of human leadership. And it sounds like your typical convention center topic, but I'm really gonna make it so practical and trying to like look behind the scenes on how we perceive leadership and how that affects the leaders that we choose, the things that we focus on, etc. And I think it's entirely within the last part of the iceberg on the second slide on the iceberg model where it says events, practical behavior, systems. Yeah, the mental models. So I like to volunteer later on some session to present on on there's 2 mental models. This one, the one that I'm going to be adapting and presenting and towards conflict management on the gravity training next week. But there's also one called meta thinking, and so, I'd maybe that's why I found it so useful, because it's something I'm already researching and working on, and so that's something for later on. But yeah, I can contribute with the mental models. I've some other things that I've compiled from books on mental models, and I'd like to share that with the community in a structured way, right? In a like a proper presentation.
Exactly. So please put that also on the end. If you say, I got it already structured, etc., no need to spar. We can really just add it to the schedule and offer, because that's exactly the point, right?
Yeah.
The whole AI ethics goes back to, I'm just saying it's not something token engineering related, restricted, knowing that our field is quite interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary anyways, but it's really something that is embedded in everything we do, every tool, technology we create. Technology is not ideology free, in a sense that we wish it is, but it's not, you see it with these algorithms that learn things from the data, but the data is curated and fed into those algorithms by some people. And even if they just, don't see it, they have, for example, created data sets with biases into them, right?
Yeah.
And it's very simple or easier to see now, but in token engineering, I think that was from the very start when you realize you have this new power of embedding really programmable values into an infrastructure. This is when you realize, oh, do I know what I'm doing? For sure. And that's basically one thing, to go to those mental models. And someone wanted to say something?
I'll just say that it's very interesting what you said. These some authors describe it as weapons of math destruction, MATH. WMDs, weapons of math destruction, because they are invisible monsters, right? These algorithms.
Love it.
And I bet that when we first shifted from nomads to being sedentary and building communities around agriculture and livestock, I bet that we wouldn't like just snakes running around our zone where it was starting to become civilized. But right now, because we have invisible snakes and monsters and wolves of different scope, they're silent weapons. And most of the world that has not seen, or the unbanked and the people who make really the bulk, really not us that we've been fortunate enough to receive the opportunity that we have, but really the bulk of the world, they haven't even really being empowered by Web 2, and now we're bringing Web 3, and they're like, wait, what's Web? So we have this monumental task before us, like educating and evangelizing and pulling back the curtain on a lot of these things, the mental models again. And it's mental models, it's physical mental models, and it's digital mental models, like algorithmic mental models. And then there's like derivatives and the political economy behind them. It's so complicated right now. It's almost got to make sense of it. And I think that's one of the tasks of Omega.
And Roberto basically joined, I think, today. Maybe you can also share it a little bit, because I believe it touches, or at least the worldview part touches a little bit. It's so complex, but we also want to have progress, right? We don't want to be paralyzed by analyzing all of the aspects, because it's just not going to get any simpler just by analyzing. You might appreciate its complexity, right? But
also the Cynefin framework that Durga has shared with us several times, I think that goes into
that's also super helpful. Just one more for the others. Basically, that we understand that these are the planes, different planes, and when we have something working, we went from the chaotic, complex, complicated, modeled and simulated, and got it into automation and into simple, a simple bonding curve that will work, and it might work for that situation that we managed to simplify without truncating, but these planes are always moving, and as soon as we are on different terms, those simple rules that we have embedded might not work anymore. So that's going to be one session I all of us highly recommend and are looking forward to. Definitely. So, and today, really, so that's basically where we were coming from, right? Just, seeing, quantifying events and saying, okay, we just need to create the right rewards so those events change by changing the behaviors of people. This is the leverage point that we are working off from. but it would be much more effective if we started, the deeper we go, the higher the mental models. So if we can make the system structures visible, then people will be better able to change their behaviors, not just by being rewarded, not like the social scoring systems that I truly, and I think most of us, dread and wouldn't want token economies to be, but really even going further, helping people to check their mental models when they make decisions, design decisions, but also decisions in participating. People just voting their gut feeling, but also knowing why, right? And challenging how people or communities together to not challenge for the sake of challenging, but just be aware that in a group, in a global community, especially as diverse as ours, these different belief systems are valuable, right? But still, for common action, we will need common grains of truth in those pluralities or multiplicities. So basically, that was, I don't want to go into this, but just to give you, um, yeah, just to give you, um, let me put it this way, pushing the envelope, that we really need participants to become self-sovereign individuals, be able to make the right decisions and be knowing that that right will adapt because the system changes, etc. But still keeping the ability to form consensus in the true meaning of the word is feeling together. Right, that's super important, and all of this, I think the that's why I always look to gravity, conflict management, that working group, right? And I think that is where we merge, and basically people who are aware of their mental models, who strive to understand first before being understood, curious enough or capable enough also to communicate in this community. These are the things that will be true game changers. And yeah, I'm coming to understand that, I think that what can be embedded in a smart contract on a global ledger will be very simple to help us by interacting with it to, show our preferences or beliefs, but also see others and really help people to coordinate better, not making decisions for them better. So I think this whole reasoning part will and shall be human because, because we're bringing what it is that makes these systems qualitatively different. And that's basically when I say coming from first principles, it's really about all of the qualitative aspects of human coordination, right? That if you just took it to in data-driven algorithms and optimization, where I come from, we would not have that quality of a system. But that requires really us humans to be able to communicate across different worldviews, identify these different modes of reasoning. And I think with these decision frameworks, we're opening up to just opening up to see that these frameworks are helping, that we can use multiple, etc., and that we have this goal to reach a common understanding, common language, a common guiding principle, knowing that those principles, especially the organizational ones, must change, must be adaptive, because this is a complex adaptive system. So, and with that, basically these are, what I would love to make into something that is more like a game, like more interactive. So that's why it would be great if you try to apply, understand what it might mean or what it means to you when we go through this now, and also really just play back, without hesitation. There is definitely no right or wrong, or am I doing this right? It's really about testing whether this is helping us to see different worldviews when we're thinking about making a decision making, a design of a token economy. And one thing we could do, unless you want to bring something else, is we can take the example that Sean brought in our first focus group. So we had a focus group with many practicing token engineers and participants of token economies, but mostly people who really make those decisions and implement or are there as token engineers in a project. And one of such story was, of this project where the participants of this token economy, or those who want to design it, actually design it for, making the preservation of forests pay off, such that people decide to actually not cut off old trees that will require decades to grow back, but also currently really capture multitudes of CO2 compared to other sorts of trees. So it's a special forest. When you come from this side, it's very clear, don't cut them. But on the other side, people who live there also live from the revenues of logging. And also there is a whole industry behind with lobbies and so on and so forth. So all of that world, existing world views, right? That an industry that is profitable, must be protected at all costs. And now there is this new group coming in, but basically, this token engineer felt that they were not 100% sure that it's either right or wrong. People who live there require revenues. This old system is very hard to just get rid of. How do you incentivize for or against something without knowing what is 100% desired or good? So, yeah, can you relate to that example? When we would go through these worldviews, when we take this example in the back of our head, there is, yeah.
Yeah, I can relate totally, because it goes back to sometimes many points we cannot see from the very beginning. We enter into Web3 and the tokenized markets, so to speak. That again, we, as you said, we are incorporating our ideologies and our assumptions in any system we encounter. And in this regard, we are seeing like this tokenized economy is being applied to many ecological transition projects, and this is something that is affecting like the whole world. And sometimes we are here and we are in our group saying, okay, yes, let's focus on use cases, and this is one of the main use cases that are right now being applied for NFTs. And then you are speaking out Canada, and you said, okay, this is fantastic. If in Canada they don't cut the oak trees, that would be fantastic for reducing carbon emissions. But then you start thinking, okay, this is happening in Canada, and this is worldwide view or trying to conserve nature and to use more renewable energies. But then you see right now in Canada and the US, the electricity prices and the index prices are fairly normal in comparison with they have been in the last 5 years, so to speak. But then you come to Europe and you say, okay, let's make the same advances in an ecological transition. But then you have Germany, and you are super used to work for this transition economy for electricity. And in Western Europe right now, the electricity prices are rising like hugely. And then you say, okay, maybe electricity and gas energy is right now possible in the US and in Canada, but it is not feasible for Europe. So, for example, this is like a huge issue right now in the markets. So I relate totally with this.
So I think electricity is a bit more controversial, because maybe we should take that, because, for example, I always say decentralized solar and storage, but then when people tell me that, but getting lithium out of the ground is not that clean, and people lose their, there's another problem with the resource scarcity of lithium and so on and so forth. So I'm just making a note that that might be a better, more controversial example.
Yes, because it's all in the supply economy, in the demand and supply. So any change in one of these supply and demand markets is going to affect the other. So we cannot say this is the primordial, this is the best use case, because then it's going to impact all the other markets. So and this is not something that, as an analyst or a developer, you first think of, like, okay, my whole tokenized system is going to impact the other point of the world economy, but this happens.
Yeah. So then basically, when we have such a scenario, I think we should have this maybe like an origin story, and then ask these four questions, right? Why does this tokenized economy ecosystem need to exist, or how it will come into existence? That's a nice question, because it goes down to your or to participants' belief. Some of them will say because there is no other option. Some of them says because other people want to make money, right? The second one is the unfolding pattern. Like, what do you think this transition or this token economy will evolve once you put it in place? The third one, ontology, is in by really looking at all of the mapping, when you have done it like this, the participants of the token economy, the rough value exchange, why the token economy exists, and the initial rules you might have set in place, where will it evolve to? And the fourth one is actually the most important one, and this leads back to actually, questioning all of the three before. What makes these justified beliefs justified? Is it just, the founders who believe in the system? Or have they gone through, a collaborative process where those beliefs actually have been incorporated or have been collectively worked through, and hence through consensus believed to be justified or believed to be holding true for the system? I always find those four questions intriguing, but also they can be very deep. So could some of you dare to give a bit of feedback before we move on to the next one? I think compared to that, the worldviews is much easier, but I would love to hear whether you could relate, something intrigued you, or whether you just lost and you couldn't even get a foothold.
I'm sorry I'm late.
Hi,
Yeah.
hi Douglas.
Sebnem, I just wanted to know if we have access to that document. I really would
Yeah,
love
I can share it. I can also share the original, the bigger one, that has more context. But yeah, I'll share it again.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is really cool. And yeah, I think a lot of this, I've seen similar things when the kind of like when doing systems thinking or kind of like going deeper into that, and how important, yeah, the mental models are, right, for the for the structuring and for the really understanding of how complex systems work, right? So I guess one thing that I wonder, right, is in terms of the application of these ideas, right? Like I was mentioning in that chat, right, or in that comment, that I'm in touch with several DAOs, and I think that there's different flavors of DAOs. So the Cynefin model, I think definitely we need something like that for DAOs. I think because they're so broad now, right? And what's interesting to me is that I'm seeing a bit of a repeat of 2017, right, when the ICOs were the craze, right, and everyone was like, yeah, throw stuff at the wall, we'll see what sticks. It doesn't matter if we break it. Let's just move fast, right, and learn, try, right, which is cool. I like the spirit of that, right. But and I'll get back to the mental models in 1 second. Just want to give the context.
Go ahead, please.
So one of the things that I'm noticing is that just awareness about what mental models people are using is completely lacking, right? In a lot of these conversations and in a lot of these DAOs. So I'm wondering if a low-hanging fruit is to actually have. I mean, it's kind of like cliche or a little, I don't know how cringy, but hey, 5 things that you should ask yourself before you start a DAO, right? In order to start surfacing some of those mental models that frankly are going implicit, right? And are not and unquestioned as well, right? So yeah, I was just thinking as you were talking, I was thinking about how would we be able to apply this quickly, because I do think that there's low hanging fruit here. I think that the level of depth that we're in right now is like, even attention. No, seriously, attention would already be kind of like would give people a little pause to think that more about what they're doing.
So I agree with you, totally. Even the wordings, etc. But maybe instead of explaining the model or framework, like this is the question, make it really accessible. What am I asking myself in these 4? And then, as you say, maybe our first goal is really just awareness raising and saying, if you want, if you got goosebumps and you realize the power of mental models, and that you want to gain more, then we can go deeper into that direction. Whereby I must say, really, this is so deep. Fabian would used to, I think that was when worldviews go past each other without making a noise. I'm like, you don't realize how far back I am. I come from the industrial world where everything is automated. You make a decision, decision tree, and the world will sort itself according to your decision tree. That's the mindset. We're trying to actually just put the little crack in it, so the rest will come. Yeah.
I do want to say that to this end, I feel like there's we need to kind of develop a pedagogy of increasing complexity tolerance in people.
Yes.
And so, I do wonder if we can, maybe think about a process by which that can happen. And I do find that people engage with the gravity work a lot because it goes to the emotional part of themselves, And so like I often describe spiral dynamics and integral theory, both of which have enormous complexity to them. I'm really grateful that I came to those two things because I'd first come to nonviolent communication, which I could see inside of nonviolent communication that the idea of not creating an enemy image out of any given person was super useful.
Yeah.
But then when I looked at spiral dynamics, I often talk about it as, well, now I have a whole spiral framework in which to not make an enemy image out of a person and instead give them some way of contextualizing their behavior. And so, so what I mean by that is to say that perhaps, kind of starting with this emotional gravity stuff might be the process. And I think if you did it in the other way around, you would not necessarily get the same kind of message, and it might not motivate you as much. So perhaps we can just consider as a group different ways in which to, pedagogically develop this type of thing.
Do you have a schedule of past or ongoing sessions or in gravity that you gave, like those courses? Do we have a calendar of those?
That's a question for Juan.
Yeah.
But for the past ones, I think like the all the videos are in YouTube until yesterday's session, and we have a link that to the Graviton training calls to the calendar.
Yeah. Definitely. So we should definitely link those because it really goes hand in hand, the seeing, but then the next question is, okay, I grasped it, but I'm lacking the capability to communicate language, communication. That's a whole different level, ability to find the right words. So that's why I really would love to, get people here, from the mechanistic view. There is more. And this is why, and then get this crack, have people really see what they know already, but would love to simplify away that there will be many, always different worldviews. Which
because I think you are identifying like what is the problem of methodology, and it is not something like primordial or in the base of what we are like talking in this group. So you think we lack like a mechanistic way to be able to express what we have been gathering in this kind of sessions and to be able to communicate this to people. But then I just connecting to what Durgada said, like the pedagogy. Sometimes people don't need to have like these compressed words coming from the same people or the same mouths, because the same mouths are biased or are complicits of the worldviews they put into the table, right? So I think your linguistics thing or your communication or mechanistic approach, you think you lack, which is possibly your worldview or something you are considering from your own eye to your interior, right? If I'm correct, I don't want to be like being very psychological here into the worldviews of everyone, because this is the value maybe of this group. to be able to gather all the differences, all the different ways of being, right? Because what we are doing here is being in this communal space. But I guess for being practical, I think the common methodology that we can apply from Graviton and Omega is something that can be distributed as well. And maybe we only lack this kind of scheduling and methodology that we have talked quite a lot. But it has to be like a little bit more organic, and not only saying, okay, we need to schedule, but then we cannot be repetitive and like being master to student. Because I, for myself, totally deny that kind of approach. So I think we need to take that into account.
What I would love is if we came to a really this dialogue or multilogue. You know what I mean? Like, if we could offer this such that people actually come and let's try it. And, you know, there is the situation, you know, okay, the situation where you have to decide how you want to incentivize this, you know, sustainability project that, you know, I think there needs to be a situation described so that, you know, an example situation clear enough that people can wrap their heads around. What is the dilemma? What is it that one cannot 100% say this is how we should be doing it? And what I would love to do, and I think it could work, but really the situation when people, you know, spend 5 minutes with the situation, you know, many sides. There are the people who want to cut the trees. There are the people who live there, who are conflicted, who need the money and the trees. And there are the people who want to save the trees at all costs, but might not be into the people who live there, you know, might not know their position and so on and so forth. So, and then basically really have this group where people are invited to just take on one worldview and really like a role or like in a debating class, if you will, right? To explain what the token economy should reward and why it is important from these different worldviews. And let's make one example. You know, saying, we don't know, right, what is the perfect incentivization of how many of those trees should stay and how many cuts. But people want to start already with an experiment, so we're just going to define the process and we'll adjust this process the more information we have, because we cannot know it from the start what is the best. So that would be a worldview that accepts limits of knowability. Could someone take on, for example, for fun, worldview? We can't measure what doesn't exist in that example.
I can take it. I can try.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so I guess, you know, if I were to argue that, I would say that the trying to like the concept of value capture, right, and all the externalities and then the intrinsic, you know, subjective measures of what's valuable and how much something is valuable, right? That's theoretically a good idea, and then we should strive for that. But the reality is that the when we're thinking about, I mean, even if we look at our current economy, right, everything is reduced to money, right? And money represents multiple choices that people are subjectively and implicitly making about value, right? But we all can agree on, and that's really the protocol, right, that allows us to exchange things. So if we don't have things that we can measure clearly, that we can at least agree that one thing is exchangeable for the other, then you really can't build a proper system from a practical perspective, not from a theoretical perspective.
Cool.
So.
Thank you. Does anyone? Yeah. Does anyone want to take another stab at, or what we could also do? We have a couple of more minutes just to get a feel, and I really crave for feedback. You know, a conservative worldview, never change a running system. Does that resonate? Do you know people who would look at those from that view? How does that sound?
Sorry, Sebnem, the question was, can we find other people to do this if we wanted to have a session around it?
Oh, no, like, yeah, right now I'm just trying to basically get an idea of if we can make this more interactive, like when we have the session with multiple people, or how we could make this more interactive.
Oh, I see. Have you used Gather?
How do you mean? Like,
oh yeah,
Gather?
So yeah, I'm gonna copy it here. So it's a really cool meeting space. I'm gonna put it in the.
In the Omega.
Yeah, it's in the Omega.
Yeah, Gather Town.
Isn't it the one that has like a game world?
Yeah, it's kind of like a.
I've seen it.
Yeah, so I see a lot of meetings are taking place now, and then when your avatar comes close to other avatars, then the video screens pop up, right? So if we wanted to have something where people kind of like split into groups and they have their own kind of like points to argue, right? There could be something that is as a group, like everyone listening in, but there could also be like individual things, and then kind of like regroup to almost like to report on what they discussed.
We could have, and we don't need 8 worldviews, right? So we could have maybe 3 or 4, depending on, and people can choose to go to those worldviews where inside one world you have the same view and you gather the same arguments or similar, and then we could make them come together.
Oh.
And from each group, do you know what I mean?
Competition.
Or basically not competition, but in one group you are in this command and control world, and everything you see is I think the explanations again need definite more accessibility.
Yeah.
But let's say we have 3 different worlds, and if you enter them, you see only from this perspective, only with this value set, right? Maybe even people can work out the value set. And then after, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes, we gather together and then we have people, the possibilities, the command and control people, and the logical positivism people. Like, I think that was mostly the engineers come together and basically see the argumentation level. That could be interesting.
I would be interested to see what it would be like to, because I see in a few of those things that some of the action modes from Cynefin would be appropriate in that, right? So, you know,
let me pull it up again.
Yeah.
Action modes, as in, sense, best practice, good practice.
Right. So I could kind of read into those different worldviews, bits from this too, right? So.
Yeah, but I see immediately, or like, for example, those people who measure, who are used to measuring it, and they might insist on best practices that they have already, and those who say, okay, we can't know everything up front, they would say, no, not best practices.
Exactly.
Please not. That's going to, throw us into chaos.
Right.
We need to do it like this. But then those people, right? Now they need to talk and find the common point. And there's something actually we had in one of those sessions, on one of the past sessions, where we looked at the Omega working group science that Marco did. And it actually is quite helpful that we say, okay, you have one worldview, and the other one might be diametrically opposing it, right? But there is a common, if you can still find this common ground, or this grain of truth here, right, then basically you can simplify all of the rest. You can, ignore it for now, but you can start from this place where you have an agreement, even if those are, opposite worldviews. It is very likely it is that if both worldviews exist, they are both valid. So that's the fascinating.
Well, the way that I deal with that is that if you can go back to the Cynefin thing, the way that I unify that is just narratively, just to say, maybe we need to begin with probe, sense, and respond. And then what we do is we come across the line between the complex and a complicated with either enabling constraints or governing constraints. And then once we're there, then we can sense and analyze, respond, come up with a plan, right? And then from there, we then create a model to go across the line between the complicated and the simple. And then you end up with the best practice. So it could be that we actually need to include all of those things, or if things have just gone horribly wrong, we might need to start in the chaotic and resolve the thing, and then get into complex and complicated, and then get to simple. Do you know what I mean? So that's my way of kind of unifying all of that.
Cool. So, and that brings me to another idea.
Hey, sorry, I do have to drop in a second. One quick, sorry to interrupt. One quick thought. So when it comes to actually bringing people together to kind of like talk about this, I'm more on the application side, right? So I definitely want to dig in deep and understand the complexity, and that's, and I've been involved in all sorts of kind of like deeper things, right? But I think that what really galvanizes the conversation and interest is to have a very specific thing to discuss, right? So not have it be abstract, but actually have something like, okay, XYZ, and this is an example that actually based on reality. XYZ wants to start a DAO and they want to just create a token, right? So that because they need to incentivize collaborators, right? And then ABC says, no, we should really understand what value we're going to generate before we start doing that, right? So having kind of like framing it in the context of a specific example, I think would enable people to embody the position better, because when you start with a high level, kind of like very abstract position, right? There's so many different angles that you can take on that position that even the language is in the way of, you may actually be saying the same thing. It's just like you're using language is the problem, right? So
yeah, definitely going for a special or easy case on which we apply those, and also we'll look into gathering.
It doesn't have to be easy. It can be complete. It can be like a one-page write-up, for example, right, about what the problem is, right?
Can I please follow up on that idea? Because we are closing to the call almost in a few minutes, and I think that's what the methodology approach and the Cynefin approach we're trying to solve. Like we started here with this integral theory that is, of course, very, very high models to understand reality, and then I think the practicality or the raison d'etre of this group is to try to apply this from a methodological point of view, like having these playbooks on this gamified framework for not only token engineers, but any developer, any creator, any artist, any thinker that comes here. So I think like this suggestion you're making to have something more specific and more approachable for people to be engaged is where we are trying to galvanize and to provide for people. So I suggest here to take this suggestion like very seriously for any funding proposal we want to make, and to be able to specify which are going to be like not only the scheduling sessions, because we can just, if you only think about sessions, we can only say, okay, please record yourself talking about your perspective or the very specific problem you're engaging right now, and we could reproduce that on demand like forever. But I don't think that's the value. Having the integrated interaction into the group and in the wider ecosystem. I think all the DAOs are discussing this right now, and I don't know if there is gonna be like a holy grail for everything, but maybe we can strive for making these specific avenues. And I guess this is like the bridges Drogados is taking from the simple to the complicated, but it's not that simple because we have been talking about this for like past 10 months.
Yeah,
we can integrate the design into the gamified suggestion we are making for next session.
Yeah, and listen, I completely understand the challenge of generalizing these concepts, right, so that they're applicable in different situations. I totally understand that. My only point is that I think that it's an iterative process, right? That you can't only philosophically, that it has to have a little bit of application and then get back. You know what I mean?
Yes, I for myself want to have like this specific adventure, at least, like trying to be able to put that together. Like, okay, you come here and you think this is like only economics, and then you discover the philosophy part, and you are only thinking about system and supply and demand, and then you say, okay, no, this is algorithmic. At least to have these kind of bridges.
I have to drop. Great talking to you guys.
Thank you, and we'll catch up. So
bye. Yeah.
Bye. So just to sum it up, or maybe I just write it in the summary, not to take too much of your time while I'm thinking, while I'm talking. But I believe these sessions that play well into each other, and this one world views game could be really, interaction, but just to make the interaction easier, could be tied to a story. But then, people who have participated in the previous sessions, like Cynefin and so on, they would be able to take apart the situation, even the worldview game, while we are playing it, very differently than the people who are looking for a recipe. And maybe that's even, seeing those differences might even galvanize people, just to see that there is a playground that can be had, and decision making or life doesn't need to be the drama of decision making unfolding. So yeah, thank you everyone for sharing